People say, oh, historically it was a gold standard. Not true. Yes, gold was used more for international transactions, but it was not fixed. All right, it just floated. That's it. You always have these. It's why you see there's a silver gold ratio. We look at a chart of a few hundred years, you see spikes and bottoms. Everything in life has a cycle to it. So you just can't fix it. Can gold be the medium of exchange again? Yes, no problem. All right, but you just can't fix the value.
This is Little by Little with Andy Schechtman.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Little by Little. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome to the show today a legendary economic forecaster, the founder of Armstrong Economics, and the mind behind the powerful Socrates AI model long before any of us knew what AI was. Martin Armstrong has advised governments, managed billions, and predicted global financial crises with an eerie accuracy. I can attest to that. His economic confidence model has become a cornerstone for understanding global cycles, and today he joins us to unpack where the world is headed next. Mr. Armstrong, great to have you, sir. Welcome in.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure is mine. Pleasure is mine. I'm looking forward to this. Let's jump right in. Socrates has identified 2025 as the beginning of a stagflationary crisis in the U.S. I agree. With a critical collapse in confidence projected in mid-May of next year, 2026. With the Fed now cornered between rising inflation and declining growth, is there any path left in your mind for the Fed to regain control without triggering a deeper economic spiral, or have we already crossed that point of no return?
No, all your central banks have actually lost control. Mainly because the theories that we were all taught in school back, way back when, Keynesian economics. When he came up with that idea in the 30s, U.S. had a balanced budget. So it made sense if you raise interest rates or lower interest rates, it affected us directly. But today, the government is the biggest borrower in the room, and not just the U.S., but they all are. So they can't raise interest rates anymore to stop inflation, because then the government expenditures blow out. So they're actually trapped. And look, they know this is a confidence game. So they're not going to come out and say what I say, because they have to at least be perceived that they're in control. Back in the 87 crash, They started the G5 at the Plaza Court in 85. So we want the dollar down 40%. Okay. That's where I went to Reagan and I said, you're going to cause a crash. And because they had sold like a third of the national debt to Japan. And I said, they're going to sell. Why? Because they're going to lose 40%. Don't you understand? Then they had the Louvre Accord in February of 87. They said, okay, that's enough. The dollar is going down far enough. The dollar continued to make lows. That's what ended up with the 87 crash, because it suddenly everybody back then said, oh, shit, the central banks really can't control this. And then the rumors were the dollar is going to fall another 40%. So everybody just started selling, and I got called into the Brady Commission to investigate it. And I at least got them. If you read the Brady report at the end, it says, we think foreign exchange had something to do with it. That was the best I could get out of them. Right? They're never going to come out and say, hey, the G5 caused this, but I mean, this is the world we live in. It is all smoke and mirrors. And the real risk we have is when the public begins to realize that they can't control this. Then you get into this free fall type thing. So it's, I don't see the Fed being able to steer us out of this. We're in this recessionary trend because we're all in this together. Europe is the worst. I know a lot of people keep talking about, oh, the dollar is going to crash. There's that. Okay, what are you going to do? Buy euro? You're talking about big money. We're not talking about just gold. I mean, we're talking about billions and billions of dollars. You got 34 trillion in U.S. national debt, and globally, you've got over 100 trillion in sovereign debt. So, what I'm concerned about is that Europe is pushing towards war because they know the end is near. I got dragged in to all this stuff largely. I had a client who was a executive VP at Franklin National Bank back in '73, and he knew that I understood trading, etc. And he asked me, "Would you come in and take a look at this?" He says, "I think we have a currency problem, but I'm not sure." And Franklin National Bank was the first bank to fall after the collapse of Bretton Woods. They actually were the founder of MasterCard. So that failure after that, every time there was a currency problem, it was like, go get that guy that did that one, So I got dragged into everything. I mean, from, forming the G5, I was asked to come into that. I mean, when they were forming the euro, they came to me. I met with them, explained, okay, this is how we create a currency. And all the propaganda they were putting out was all a lie. Oh, we're all going to pay the same interest rate. We'll eliminate volatility. And Europe is a bigger economy. We'll beat the dollar. And it was all propaganda. The problem was that Helmut Kohl knew, and he admitted before he died, that if he allowed the German people to vote, he would have lost 7-3. So he took Germany into the euro, but he insisted no consolidation of the debt. So as a trader, all right, we used to trade our Deutschmark, Italian lira, whatever. And I warned them. I said, this is not going to work. You're just going to move the volatility from the currency market to the bond market.
Because everyone has different spreads.
Exactly. And we all see that on the screens today. All right. So the problem is, let's say I got $100 billion on a hedge fund. All right. I could pick up the phone and say, buy me $100 billion in Treasury. When it comes to Europe, I still got to make the same decision as if it was currency. Oh, let's see. Do I want Germany, France, Netherlands? You still got to, nothing changed. So the problem here is that governments default. And all the research I've done and how does this really happen? It's not the quantity of debt. That's kind of a misnomer. I mean, we could have a 5 quadrillion debt. That's not the issue. The issue is when people lose confidence in the government. It could be 5 trillion, it could be 34 trillion, it could be 60 trillion. That doesn't matter. It's kind of like what I said about the Louvre Accord. And when all these governments are in these Ponzi schemes, they have to sell new debt to pay off the old. And the problem comes when nobody wants to buy the new debt. Then you can't pay off the old. And that's when it comes crashing down. And Europe it's just a basket case. It is, it's far worse than the United States or anything else. The only country that's even maybe on the same level of a crisis is Japan. But the Japanese are different. They have more confidence in the government because the emperor used to be God. I used to be in Tokyo a lot. You go to dinner with some of the old guys, the head of different companies and the big ones, and they get a few drinks in them, and they go, the emperor's still God. Yeah, okay. So Europe is fragmented. Everything they promised has been basically undone. They promised it wouldn't become a dictatorship, and because it would require 100% consensus. So Hungary didn't want to vote. Oh, okay. Well, we're going to change that, because Hungary won't give money to Ukraine. So little by little, they've wheedled down it is a dictatorship. That's it. Although they call Putin a dictator and all this stuff, actually the only two heads of state that the people directly vote for was Putin and the United States. The rest of them are all parliamentary. So the heads of the parties appoint them, like Canada. I hear a lot of complaints from Canadians, well, we didn't pick, Carney. The politicians do. And nobody stands for election. Ursula in the EU, she's never been elected to anything. And all the people that behind the curtain to make up the laws in the commission, none of them stand for election. So, Europeans, this is why I think I do a lot of podcasts in Croatia, Serbia, Italy, Netherlands, all over the place. And I hear the same thing. It's always maybe different reasons, but many people are getting frustrated with Brussels. The climate, issues, then you have the migrant crisis. And these were all things that were imposed upon them, that they did not have the right to vote for this stuff. Yet they pretend they're a democracy, and they're not. So I'm seeing the same frustration. And that's key.
Well, pulling on that string a little bit, in watching some of your videos, you suggested that this old European regime is collapsing, and that we have a silent majority beginning to push back against this political establishment. It seems as though some of these leaders are turning to the neocon strategies to maintain control. We're seeing, talk about drafting and mandatory drafting. Always, every single time I get online, I have to do this. It's almost, you can't even make it up. I mean, I could.
That's right. Mine just heard yours.
Every single time. I apologize. Anyways, do you believe the figures in particular, like Macron and Tusk and Merz, would rather escalate us towards a major war, even World War III, rather than admit policy failure and relinquish their power?
Oh, absolutely.
Which you didn't answer that way that fast. It's a little scary if you think about it.
Well, I have very high contacts in France, and they believe that Macron is more or less like de Gaulle. It's a Napoleon complex. And for people that don't understand about de Gaulle, he in 1966 he ordered all Americans out, ordered all NATO stuff out. France is the third largest nuclear power, all on its own. France is still, in my opinion, still basically dealing with Napoleon's loss. To create the European community, the documents have been declassified. The CIA was funding the whole thing. They wanted Europe to band together as a bulwark against Russia's communism. And de Gaulle objected. And so he finally agreed, only after they threatened to cut off all Marshall Plan to France. He agreed to accept Germany in, but not the British. Britain wasn't allowed to join the EU until after de Gaulle died. Look, I mean, and if you take the train underneath the channel, where did the Brits have it stop at? Waterloo Station. I mean, this is basically tit for tat going back and forth for a long time. De Gaulle accepted the Germans, but not the Americans and the British. So just the way it is.
Seems like a silly trade, but I get it. I guess old grudges run deep. It's interesting, but
throughout Europe, look, I've seen this. It's same thing in Ukraine. We had employees, one in Kiev and one in Donetsk. If you ever brought a bottle of Russian vodka to dinner in Kiev, they would smash it over your head. Yugoslavia, I was called in before the country broke up, and they said, they killed 600 of us and threw us in a common grave. And I thought I missed something on the news. I said, really? I said, when did that happen? Oh, about 700 years ago. I've been in Greece. I've been in Athens when Merkel was against bailing out Greek banks, and they were dressed up as Nazis walking down the street, protesting. So, I mean, yes, old grudges in Europe remain to this day. I mean, they're still there.
Yeah, I see. I believe you. I see that. Well, let's bring it a little closer to home. I talked over the last several years, my phrase was, it's too stupid to be stupid, seeing many of the things that had happened in this country. And I've heard you say that many of the moves, the geopolitical moves, seem so reckless, they almost feel intentional. That's a more articulate way of saying it's too stupid to be stupid. And so between Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, which openly defied the one China policy, and the Biden administration, funding the war and green-lighting missiles into Russia right towards the end. And, it wasn't him who made that decision. But on top of everything else, do you believe that this was just ridiculous incompetence, or were they actually trying to provoke a global conflict?
No, they're trying to provoke it. Look, I know some of these neocons. I mean, even Bill Kristol spoke at one of our conferences, and I can tell you that this is, back in the 90s, I argued with him. He was talking about taking out Saddam Hussein, Assad, and Gaddafi, and would bring peace to the Middle East. I said, you're out of your mind. Have you ever been there? We drew the borders. These are not countries. All right. They still view themselves as tribes. I mean, you look at, there's Kurds, there's Sunni versus Shiite. In many respects, you needed somebody like Saddam Hussein to stop them from all killing each other. You removed him, and what do we got? We ended up with ISIS cutting off people's heads and stuff like that. Look, that's the Middle East. And a lot of people don't understand it, but it's more or less, I mean, just look at Ireland. You have, Protestant versus Catholic. All right. Countries divided. That's what the Middle East is. Sunni versus Shiite. All right. Shiite is like Iran. The country should be run by the church. Sunni, you have a king, running like Saudi Arabia. So completely different philosophies. So, you find the same thing in Judaism, Catholicism, you name it. There's always the left and a right.
Which is one of the reasons that I found it interesting a year or two ago that China brokered a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and even talked about building embassies in each other's countries and building a highway between the two countries. And I don't know, maybe my enemy's enemy, is my friend type of deal. I'm not quite sure what to make of that, but you're right. You see that everywhere. And it seems to be something that the United States keeps poking its head into and perhaps foolishly. Speaking of, unless you'd like to comment on that for a moment.
No, I would just recommend you can go on YouTube and Google up General Wesley Clark's 2007 speech. And he went to the Pentagon after 9/11. And he was shocked. They said they were going into Iraq, and he asked, "Oh, we've tied Saddam to 9/11." They said no. He also came out and said he was told they intended to go into Iraq and conquer 7 countries, all the former Soviet satellite countries in the Middle East. This is the neocons, what you talked about. It is deliberate. You'll also find McNamara's apology on YouTube before he died. He was the neocon that took us into Vietnam. And before he died, he said, "Look, I'm sorry, we were wrong. We thought Russia was behind it." He said, quote unquote, "It was just a civil war." 58,000 Americans died for that one. Look, these people have waged wars constantly. And they just hate Russians, and it doesn't matter. I was, I did get called in by, the Reagan administration back then. And I can tell you when Gorbachev hinted that he wanted to speak, Reagan wanted to go, and I know what they told him. All right, they couldn't say he was a communist anymore because communism collapsed. So they said you can never trust a Russian. So it just turned from hatred of communism to racism, I guess. Look, Russia is more of a Christian country than probably the West. And they're not capitalists anymore. And they certainly, all this propaganda that, if Ukraine falls, they'll come take Europe, and he wants to resurrect it. He's been there since 1999. I think if he wanted to invade and take Europe, it would have been a lot sooner than now. All right. He doesn't have too many years left in office. You don't wait till your last day. It's the Russian people don't want to conquer. These are old ideas. Khrushchev, we will bury you. That stuff was more or less, socialism is going to defeat capitalism. This was their dogma. They overthrew him. There was a major grain crisis in 1963. They had to buy grain from the West that showed their collective farming didn't work. You had the Cuban Missile Crisis, 62, and they overthrew him in 64. Then Brezhnev came in, but there was an actual coup against Khrushchev. They thought he was erratic, nuts. There's even a movie I would recommend. I think it was called The Courier or something, about there was a Russian colonel who was feeding information about the whole Khrushchev wanted to put missiles into Cuba, and that's how we knew about it. And he got caught, and they executed him. But he was against Khrushchev because he also thought he was, erratic and a danger.
Fascinating. You could point fingers for erratic and dangerous behavior a lot of places.
Yeah.
These days, not just at other countries. Let's switch gears a little bit, Martin. You're fascinating. I could talk to you all day. Let's talk a little bit about China right now. they're now the world's largest producer and importer of gold. And with gold officially now recognized as a tier 1 asset under Basel III, its monetary role seems to be quietly strengthening, almost as if gold isn't reacting to something, but it is being reintegrated, perhaps. Not sure. But anyways, given your view that China, and I found this interesting, is destined to become the next financial capital of the world, where does gold fit into that situation? And how intentional do you think their accumulation strategy has been?
Well, you have to understand what happened. The neocons were really running the Biden administration. As you said, they sent Pelosi over to, wipe out to change the one China policy. But you also have Blinken, pushing through with the sanctions on Russia. And I should point out, in 2014, when Russia did go into Crimea, Obama tried that. He went to SWIFT, wanted to have them removed, and they've refused. They said, you're not going to turn this into a political weapon. So they replaced the head of SWIFT in 2019. This guy does whatever he's told, So this is how I would say that these neocons are stupid in the sense of they're focused only on defeating Russia. They have no concept of the economy, funding the debts, or anything of that nature. Just, I got to kill Russians. That's it. And there's even a clip out of Lindsey Graham, in a meeting with Zelensky, saying this is the best money we ever spent killing Russians. I mean, if you said that about blacks or Jews or something, that's a hate crime. You'd be in prison for 20 years or something. But so by putting the sanctions on Russia, removing them from SWIFT, that was a red flag to everybody else. And then you have Blinken, this idiot, threaten China. If you help Russia, we'll do the same to you. And so they go, oh, okay, no problem. So that creates BRICS. What is BRICS? It's really the division of the world financial system. So SWIFT was, everybody was connected and was real globalism. Now you have two systems. So the main reason China and Russia have been accumulating gold is very simple. You go to war. What do they do? China owned up to 10% of the U.S. national debt. You think the U.S. would pay it? They'll default. All right. So they realize that you cannot have your reserve assets in the currency of your enemy. All right. So that's where gold's going. And look, I speak to central banks. It's wrong to say, oh, geez, they're buying gold because they think it's going to go up. They're not investors. This has got nothing to do with that. What it is, they don't care if it goes down. It's basically neutral. So what they're doing is moving reserves from dollars and euros. China has been selling off euro debt. Japan just dumped 50-some billion of euro bonds. Europe is beating the war drums, and over there, you really want to have any of their debt? You're not going to survive. So whatever you have in European debt, it's going, forget it, roll it up, smoke it. That's about all it's going to be good for. So that's why they're moving to gold. All right. So it's not because they think it's going to go up, it'll be 4,000 or whatever. They don't care if it goes down. That's not the issue. The issue is basically you definitely do not want to have your reserves tied up in a currency that is your enemy. So, China has been excessively aggressive now that Trump's come to the White House, but they are still moving towards gold, only because it's neutral. All right. You can't really have a gold standard per se, like Bretton Woods, mainly because there is a business cycle. All right. So you can't fix gold. That was the whole problem. You fixed gold at $35, but you didn't limit the amount of dollars that you were creating. I mean, obviously, a 3-year-old with a pocket calculator could figure out it's going to go bust at some time. And, people say, oh, historically, it was a gold standard. Not true. Yes, gold was used more for international transactions, but it was not fixed. All right, it just floated. That's it. Rose and fell like everything else in life. There was big inflation during the mid-19th century because so much gold was found in California. So the value of gold went down versus silver. You always have these. It's why you see there's a silver gold ratio. We look at a chart of a few hundred years, you see spikes and bottoms. Everything in life has a cycle to it. So you just can't fix it. Can gold be the medium of exchange again? Yes, no problem. All right. But you just can't fix the value. Because, look, there could be a wheat shortage, climate, whatever, drought, and the price of wheat will double or triple. All right. This is the way history works. The climate turned very cold up north, and then they moved south, and that became the sea people, and they overthrew all the Bronze Age people except for Egypt. You've always had these things historically. You can't find any century that's a flat line.
So on that thread, which I'm glad that you said what you did. I've talked about BRICS now for almost 5 years. It's kind of what thrust me on the stage. The People's Bank of China just announced its digital renminbi cross-border settlement system that is now connected to 10 ASEAN countries. It's basically these countries in Southeast Asia and 6 Middle Eastern nations. This enables almost 40% of global trade to bypass the SWIFT system. So, and again, all of this would settle in renminbi. In practical terms, China's digital currency bridge has reduced cross-border payment processing times on SWIFT from 3 to 5 days to 7 seconds. And that eliminates the need for all the intermediary banks with a 98% reduction in handling fees. That's 40% of global GDP right now, just with this announcement. Do you see a digital yuan, or to your point, a BRICS gold-backed settlement system, not a common currency, but a settlement system where they trade in local currencies and settle imbalances in gold? Do you see this ultimately replacing SWIFT as a real threat, or just as a negotiating chip to weaken U.S. leverage?
Well, it's more of a negotiating chip at this stage in the game. Will SWIFT survive? Look, I think we're looking at the collapse of the world financial system as we know it. Our computer's been projecting that for like 2032. And because you're looking at the collapse of all these forms of government. The worst form of government it is basically this parliamentary Republican type idea. For example, we are never asked, shall we go to war with Russia or China or anything else? They just do this. This is a Republican representative. Do they really represent us? They represent whoever's paying them the most, basically, and that's been the problem throughout history. I would advocate more of a direct democracy, which is closer to like Switzerland, where people at least get to vote on a referendum. But parliamentary systems are even much worse. Because like I said, the head of a state you don't even get to pick who it is. So all this is coming to a head as the economics. Look, we've been in these Ponzi schemes since basically World War II, and look, Keynes had said, "Fine, you can run a deficit to help balance out the economy." He never advocated year after year, but that's what we have. And people ask me about, can you go back to a gold standard? Not under the political system we have, because basically what happens is we have to change the political system. A Democrat wouldn't know how to run. You're going to vote for me and I'll give you this. If you're on a fixed exchange rate, you can't do that. All right. So you're going to have to come back to, okay, vote for me because I'm a better manager than he is. But so we're in this socialistic agenda, particularly Europe, even more so in the United States. They don't know how to run unless they're promising, lollipops and a free car or something. It's so that's got to change. So it's the whole thing. It's revising the monetary system is not going to work unless we also change the political system. We have to get back to common sense and practical. And you're seeing it. When Trump was elected, that has been really a contagion, and you're seeing it in Europe. The AfD, they're a bunch of right-wing Nazis. Now they're the largest party. People are fed up with all this stuff, and you're seeing this what they're calling far right, which is really mostly just common sense.
Yeah, it seems the far left is the scary radical side after what we've watched the last few years.
Look, I have friends in Germany. One has a 13-year-old daughter, will not even allow her to walk to the bus stop for 2 blocks.
That's crazy. Not the world you and I grew up in.
No, it's not. And, now Ursula has at least agreed to some deportation. This is just, they make these decisions without any idea. I mean, yes, okay, fine. Birth rates were declining. So as the birth rates decline, all these pension funds are Ponzi schemes. They kept counting on, more of the next generation to pay for the other one, because they're not taking your money and actually saving it. They're spending it anyhow. So they let all these people in, thinking, okay, fine, they'll pay taxes, whatever. They don't speak the same language. It's not, when people came here, they came here for a better life. And they assimilated. When I was in meetings with, in Europe, I told them, I said, they don't understand what made America really great. I said, it was discrimination. You go, oh my God, how could you say that? I said, because it was fair. Whoever was the last off the boat didn't get a job until they spoke English. Once they all spoke English, then you ask an American, what are you? Oh, I'm half German, half Irish, whatever. You don't see that in Europe, because of the language.
I don't think it's such an imposition to expect someone to learn the language and the culture of the country they're moving to. I think that's actually pretty logical myself.
Look, I mean, you want to go and become a citizen in Zurich, you have to learn to speak, German. You had to have skills. That's why a lot of the I saw it only with Brexit in Britain. Most of the Indians voted, for Farage. Why? Because they had to have English. They had to have some sort of a talent. Most of them were in medical to get in. And they objected, just open these borders. These people don't speak English or anything else and have nothing to offer. I had to do all this. Same thing here. I saw in Florida. You live down here. There've been a lot of Mexicans that are legal, and they speak English. They had to learn, offer a trade or something to get in. Same thing. They object to all these other people coming in, making them look bad.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. What is a necessity is the mother of invention. So, if you come to a place, you should at least learn how to speak. Let me ask you a question, Martin. Last question, and I really do appreciate. I'd love to sit down with a glass of wine or two and pick your brain. You ever get down this way, I hope you'll look me up, because I would really enjoy that. I'm sure people have enjoyed listening to this as well. I got 3 kids. My youngest is almost 18 years old. When you look out, 20, 30 and beyond, what gives you hope and optimism? I often talk about the Shawshank Redemption, where Andy Dufresne had to crawl through 2 miles of crap to get to the other side. Do we need to crawl through that tube of crap to get to the other side? And is there something to look forward to on the other side here in the United States?
Yes, I think so. Look, this is more or less, we go through these events historically, like the American Revolution. All right. There were people who were against the king, then others were for him, etc. And, not until Paine wrote his Common Sense did he flip the majority to against the king. So we need that watershed event yet. But you still have people not, they thinking, oh, I'll get Social Security, they're going to take care of me. It's not going to be there. I have one girl who works in our company. Her mother worked for Social Security, and her mother even told her it's not going to be there for you. So I would say that, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but we have to be mindful of what these problems are, so that when we come to this period, we can basically say, okay, fine, look, we've tried all these different types. Let's do it right this time. And as you know, I've been called into so many times to different governments and stuff like that. And every investigation they have, and somebody comes up with a solution, nobody ever asked this question. Did somebody try this before?
Yeah.
Did it work?
Yeah, that would be prudent, you would think.
I would think you would ask such a question. Everybody, oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. And off they go again. It's, look, I've dealt with heads of state. Something's changed. Before, look, I had conversations with Reagan. I was good friends with Margaret Thatcher. You could sit down and have intelligent conversations. I don't know one leader out there in Europe that I'd even want to sit down and have a glass of wine with. I shake their hand. I'd feel like I need to take a shower afterward. I don't know any of them. Maybe Orban. Maloney seems to be at least 50-50 to some degree. She was the only one that came over here for Trump's inauguration. But
that's who I would have said.
Everybody else is like, that's just so hostile. Macron doesn't want to settle on trade. Why? Because he wants France to be the cornerstone. He's actually been telling people behind the scenes, I don't know if it's out in the press yet, he will provide a nuclear umbrella to protect Europe, get rid of America. That's why I say he's got a Napoleon complex, and this is it. And even when France joined the euro, you can look this up. They agreed to join, but nobody was allowed to issue any coinage that celebrated their loss at Waterloo. Brussels did issue a commemorative coin, not for circulation. That's how they got around it. And because they don't like France so much, because de Gaulle said that the English created, Belgium just to annoy the French. So, I mean, look, that's what I mean. You have all these resentments in Europe that go back such a long time. But I think that you are looking at I would be optimistic that maybe we got a shot at trying democracy for once. But you have to go through this barbed wire crowing stuff to get there. Because the majority of people have to understand the government is dysfunctional. A number of people see that, probably a lot of people that watch your show, but not the majority.
Yeah, that bothers me because even people that one of the biggest money managers in Florida across the street from me, very well read, just reads the wrong stuff. I know a lot of people that fall into that category, and you try to lead them to water, but they won't even try and drink it. It's an interesting phenomenon where people that are very bright just refuse to do any digging outside the mainstream, which has led people very far astray. Robert Kiyosaki is a friend of mine, and he often says people can't get out of the way of what they don't see coming. And I would say that's the majority of the people that I know in my neighborhood here, but not the people that listen to you or to I. They're at least open-minded enough to look at both sides of the coin rather than just the popular narrative that is coming out of the mainstream.
As a international hedge fund manager, I was one of the first. I saw how it works. They all collect together. All right. So they're all on, like, you take the Russian collapse and, they're all in it. They're all in the same trade. And that's why I say that, the majority must always be wrong, because they provide the fuel for the correction. Either way. But it's, I saw it from, the early 80s. We were all in Geneva dealing with OPEC money. Then it was like, oh, Japan. Everybody runs over there. Okay, Japan. Then that goes bust in 89. Oh, what's next? Oh, Southeast Asia. Yeah. Then, they peaked that out in 94. Oh, the euro's coming in 98. And there it runs. They're like a pack of animals, honestly.
The more things change, the more they stay the same, in other words, huh?
Yeah, it's that's why what you're seeing, big fund managers, fine, they don't want to go against the grain.
Yeah, well, and it goes against the meal ticket. That'll all change at some point, I assume. Mr. Martin Armstrong, you're truly a legend. And in my mind, I can't thank you enough for coming on my show. And enlightening us with your candor and your wisdom. What's the best way for people to continue to follow what you're up to?
You can go to our website. It's armstrongeconomics.com. We don't sell advertising, and you don't have to put in your email, and we don't send out, 15 emails per day. I want to buy some swampland in Florida or something. I think that was all sold out in the 30s anyhow. But so, I mean, we try to keep it as an open source. We have offices everywhere from China to, Dubai. We're not blocked anywhere because everybody knows it's a computer. So it's not just my opinion. Sometimes I wish the forecasts were my opinion, because at least we got a 50-50 shot of being wrong. But,
Hey, well, like I said, you can't get out of the way of what you don't see coming, and you're helping people see what's coming and allowing them to make an educated decision as to whether or not to sidestep what's coming. And I, for one, appreciate that very much. I hope people watching this do as well. So thank you for that. Any last words you'd like to leave my audience with? I know that's
not really. It's not all doom and gloom. There is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
We got to get everybody. When everybody begins to see that what is the problem, then we can fix it.
Right on. I'm all for that. I would love to have you back on again, Martin. And if you ever get down this way across the state, please look me up. Me and you and our mutual friend can have lunch or something. But again, my distinct appreciation for you being here, and I definitely look forward to picking up where we left off. And I wish you and everyone else out there all the best and a good rest of your day.
Well, thank you. Have a good time down there.
You too, Martin.
I'm on the West Coast where we get the sun sets instead of the sun rises.
Yeah, you're over there with all my Midwesterner, Minnesota friends. I'm the only Minnesotan on the East Coast. But if I get over there, you get over here. Let's make it happen.
All right.
Thank you,
Take
Martin.
care.
Little by Little with Andy Schechtman.